My name is Jonathan Miles, and I never thought the proudest day of my daughter's life would become the most humiliating day of mine. At her wedding, in front of hundreds of guests, she looked me in the eye and told the world I was no longer her father. I stood there frozen, the applause ringing in my ears like a cruel echo. But what no one knew that day was that I had been quietly collecting every piece of the truth, and that moment would only be the opening move in a game they could never win. Amid the golden glow of the wedding hall and the chorus of laughter and toasts, my daughter said something I would never forget for the rest of my life. The chandeliers in the Santa Monica beachfront hotel ballroom poured warm light over a sea of white linens and crystal glasses. Waiters moved like clockwork trays of champagne flutes glinting under the lights. 200 guests, business executives, politicians, and family members mingled in perfectly tailored suits and shimmering gowns. The MC's voice, practiced and upbeat, guided the evening in that distinctly American wedding cadence, pausing for laughter and knowing when to let silence draw emotion from the crowd. I stood near the entrance, shaking hands with acquaintances, offering polite nods to strangers. My suit was dark navy crisp, with a tie Samantha had once given me for my birthday. I noticed it matched the wedding's color scheme, a small detail I told myself might bridge the distance that had grown between us these last few months. 3 months of planning had taught me something I'd rather not admit, no matter how much I tried. The Cole family's world felt like one I was only permitted to visit, not inhabit. My attempts to connect dinners, calls, small gestures were met with polite indifference from Margaret Adrian's mother, and a carefully neutral smile from Adrian himself. Tonight, as I scanned the room, I caught the briefest flicker Adrian leaning toward Margaret, their eyes meeting for a fraction of a second before Samantha took the stage. It was quick, calculated, almost imperceptible, but I'd spent my life reading the room. This was a move in a game I hadn't been invited to play. The MC's voice rang out, and now a few words from our radiant bride. The crowd's applause swelled as Samantha, flawless in a white silk gown that caught the light with every step, approached the microphone. Her smile was camera perfect, the kind that would look beautiful in tomorrow's social media posts. But I searched for something behind it, something that might remind me of the little girl who used to run barefoot on the beach, laughing until her cheeks hurt. She thanked Adrian's family for their love and support, spoke warmly about friends who had traveled across the country, and then she turned toward my side of the room. Her tone shifted, not cold exactly, but firm. And lastly, I need to say something personal. Jonathan Miles is no longer my father. For a second, the ballroom froze. The clinking of glasses stopped. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Then, like a reflex, dozens of phones lifted into the air, capturing the moment. I didn't move. Years in boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations had trained me to master stillness. I let the silence breathe. A small smile formed, not mockery, not anger, but the kind of smile that says, "I'm listening." Across the room, Adrian's lips curved upward, ever so slightly, victory flashing in his eyes. Margaret's expression was more refined, her satisfaction hidden behind the measured sip of champagne. Samantha continued, her voice steady, but edged with something rehearsed. He chose to walk away from me years ago, and tonight I choose to walk away from him. A ripple moved through the guests, some shocked, some eager to film, others leaning in as if this were the evening's true entertainment. I stood there breathing evenly. The temptation to defend myself was strong, but this wasn't the time. Not here. Not when the room was full of their allies and every camera was pointed at me. You don't counter a public play with a public outburst. You wait, you collect, you strike when it matters. The speeches moved on, though the air felt heavier now. Laughter resumed but quieter, with glances cast in my direction. The dinner service began. Plates of seared salmon and prime rib were delivered, but my appetite was gone. I let my eyes drift, not to Samantha, but to the people around her, the subtle shoulder squeeze from Adrian, the approving tilt of Margaret's head. Every move they made told me they believed the ground beneath my feet had just given way. They were wrong. Half an hour later, as I stepped out into the cool California night for a moment of quiet, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I glanced at the screen, thumb hovering. Curiosity won. I know why they did this. Meet me tonight. I looked back toward the glowing ballroom doors, then at the message again. Whoever sent this wasn't guessing. They were certain. And if they knew why, they might be the key to unraveling everything. I know why they did this. Meet me tonight. When the sender of the message stepped out from the shadows, I knew I had just found a piece on my side of the board. The lobby outside the ballroom was almost unrecognizable from the chaos inside. The music from the reception was muffled behind heavy doors, replaced by the soft hiss of rain against the tall glass windows. At the far end of the corridor, a side entrance opened to a dimly lit hotel bar. The scent of aged whiskey and polished wood greeted me as I stepped in. She was already there, seated in a corner booth, the golden glow from a single overhead lamp caught in her auburn hair. Isabella Cole. I recognized her from family introductions months ago. Adrian's cousin, always just out of the spotlight, speaking little, but watching everything. Jonathan, she said quietly, her voice smooth but clipped as if time was short. I slid into the booth, my back to the wall. You sent the message. She nodded, leaning forward. Margaret and Adrian planned that scene tonight. The cut off the father moment, it wasn't Samantha's idea. They convinced her it would make her look strong, independent. But the real motive to make you toxic, unfit to be associated with the Cole brand. That way, they can isolate her completely. Her eyes flicked to her phone. With a practiced motion, she brought up a set of screenshots, text messages, Margaret's name at the top. We push the abandoned daughter angle hard. He won't dare fight back in public. Adrian's reply. If the press sees him as a liability clause, 12 kicks in. He's gone for good. I looked up from the phone. Clause 12. Isabella's lips curved into something between a smirk and a warning. Prenup. Buried in legal jargon, but it says, if a parent causes reputational harm, the Cole family can take control of certain marital assets to protect stability. It's vague, dangerously so. I let the words settle. In corporate contracts, vague clauses were ticking bombs. In personal ones, they were weapons. You can get me a copy. She nodded once. I'll find it, but it won't be easy. Margaret keeps her files on a locked drive. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain tapped against the window in uneven rhythms, a counterpoint to the bass of distant music. I studied Isabella, her posture relaxed, but her eyes sharp. She wasn't here out of kindness. There was calculation in every word. Why tell me I asked? Her gaze didn't waver, because Margaret's been cutting me out too. This isn't just about money. It's about control. And I don't like being handled. We talked for another 20 minutes, exchanging only what was necessary. She would look for the prenup. I would keep our meeting quiet. Before we left, she pulled out her phone again, hit play on a voice memo. Margaret's voice, crisp and commanding, launched the hashtag tonight. Not my father. Flood the socials before midnight. By morning, his reputation will be unsalvageable. It was a clean shot across the bow. They weren't just burning bridges. They were salting the earth. We left through separate exits. My path took me through the underground parking garage, where the rain's sound was replaced by the hollow drip of water on concrete. Halfway to my car, a figure stepped out from between two SUVs. Adrian. His suit jacket was gone. His tie loosened, but his eyes were as cold as the night air. He didn't bother with small talk. "You'll regret being here," he said, his voice low, almost conversational, except for the steel underneath. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the sharpest reply. I walked past him, feeling his gaze follow me all the way to the car. As I started the engine, headlights flaring against the wet concrete, I caught a movement in my side mirror. A man I didn't recognize was standing near the far exit, phone raised. The camera flash was quick, almost casual. Somewhere else in a private group chat labeled C-Coination, a new message appeared. "Pull the girl. Plan C." I knew I had just found a piece on my side of the board. Morning light filtered through the glass walls of Daniel Brooks's downtown office. The skyline glinted beyond all steel and ambition. Daniel sat across from me, reading glasses balanced low on his nose, flipping through a stapled set of documents. He looked less like a man about to give legal counsel and more like a surgeon preparing for a complicated operation. "This," he said, tapping the third page, "is Clause 12. And you were right. It's a loaded gun. The language is deliberately vague, which makes it dangerous, but also challengeable." He leaned back. In court, ambiguity can cut both ways. In this case, it could invalidate the clause entirely. He outlined 3 paths forward, each methodical, each layered. Option A, attack clause. 12, directly argue for partial nullification. Option B, build a documented case that the clause was weaponized with intent to harm. Option C, counter their narrative in the court of public opinion. Get ahead of the story before they define you. I already knew which one I'd pursue. All of them. We discussed resources. I gave Daniel the go-ahead to discreetly transfer funds to a PR firm, neutral in name, but sharp in execution. The battlefield wasn't just legal, it was perception. By late afternoon, I was sitting in a quiet corner of a waterfront cafe. Samantha arrived 10 minutes late, sunglasses hiding more than the morning sun. She hesitated before sliding into the seat across from me. "They made me sign it," she said, voice low. "The prenup." I didn't even have time to read it. It was right before the rehearsal dinner. Margaret said, if I didn't, the wedding was off. Her hands shook slightly as she stirred her coffee. I didn't interrupt. She needed the silence to keep talking. "There's something else," she continued. "Last night, I overheard Adrian. He was on the phone with his lawyer. He called it the finishing move. Said once it's done, you'd be out of the picture for good." Her gaze shifted to her handbag. She pulled out a small black memory card in a plastic case. "This might help. It's from the wedding videographer. Behind-the-scenes clips they didn't put in the final cut." Back at the office later, I slid the card into my laptop. The footage was shaky handheld crew members, adjusting lights, the MC running through notes. Then, clear as day, Adrian's voice. "Wait for my signal before you bring her up." The MC nodded, glancing toward the reception doors. A moment later, Adrian whispered something, and Samantha was led to the microphone. The words she'd spoken, "Jonathan Miles is no longer my father," sounded rehearsed, now mechanical. When I showed the clip to Daniel, his expression hardened. "This matches something Isabella sent me this morning, a draft PR schedule. Phase 2, wedding speech." They planned it like a campaign rollout. It was almost clinical in its precision. That night, as I was reviewing my notes, my phone chimed with a new email. No subject line, no sender name. Just a single image attached, a scanned invoice from a PR agency. Paid in full by Adrian Cole, funneled through a shell corporation, MCF. At the bottom, in bold, "I don't need to shout to win, only to make them speak the truth themselves." The morning sun angled through Daniel Brooks's office blinds, casting slanted lines across the conference table. The email from 2 nights ago, the one with the invoice signed Phase 2 wedding speech, lay printed between us. Isabella sat across from me, her posture neat, her eyes sharp. Daniel tapped the page. "This is our leverage. 3 moves." He ticked them off like a general counting troops. 1, package the PR invoice with the backstage clip, push it into the record. 2, petition for partial nullification of Clause 12 in the prenup moot, their entire control mechanism. 3, leak just enough bait to make them nervous and careless. I nodded. We let them think they're racing the clock. The faster they run, the more they leave behind. We worked through the morning assigning tasks. Isabella would feed Adrian a sliver of false intel that I was preparing to release everything at a public event. Daniel's team would file preliminary motions that hinted at evidence, but withheld the details. My role was to orchestrate the stage where the Coles would perform their own undoing. That stage would be the Beverly Hills Business Leaders Gala, a black tie affair, expensive wine, and curated speeches, attended by exactly the sort of people Adrian liked to impress. By evening, the ballroom glowed with crystal chandeliers and polished silver. Conversations hummed between tables, set with name cards and embossed menus. Samantha was there, sitting with her new in-laws, her face a mask of polite detachment. When Adrian took the podium, he was in his element-perfect suit, rehearsed smile. In times of public challenge, he told the crowd, "It's vital to work closely with communications experts. We've done exactly that to protect our family's image." It was almost too easy. I caught Isabella's subtle glance from across the room before she excused herself. 10 minutes later, Margaret was spotted pulling Adrian into a side room. She spoke quickly, her voice low but urgent. "You shouldn't have said that," she hissed. "What difference does it make?" Adrian's tone was dismissive. "It's not like they can prove anything." Margaret leaned closer. "You forget Clause 12 only works if Jonathan looks bad in public. That's why we staged the wedding statement. The PR was to make it stick." Neither noticed the small device clipped under the side table courtesy of Isabella earlier that afternoon. Every word went straight to a recorder in Daniel's briefcase. I left before dessert, ignoring the curious glances of a few reporters by the exit. When one called after me, "Mr. Miles, any comment on tonight's speeches?" I smiled faintly. "The truth will speak for itself," I said, and kept walking. The next morning, Daniel's voice came through my phone, steady but electric. "We've got it. The recording's clean. And—" I could almost hear the papers sliding into a folder. "The court clerk just accepted our filing. They've scheduled a summons hearing for 48 hours from now." The marble steps of the Los Angeles County Courthouse gleamed under the late May sun as I walked in with Daniel Brooks at my side. He carried the case file like a precision weapon. Inside, the air was cool, almost clinical, but the tension was a living thing. Adrian and Margaret Cole sat at the defense table, their attorneys whispering furiously. Samantha was 2 rows back, her gaze shifting between me and her husband. Isabella, poised and expressionless, sat ready to testify. The preliminary hearing began with the usual formalities, but Daniel wasted no time. "Your Honor," he said, sliding an evidence packet across to the clerk, "we submit Exhibits A through D." On the screen, Exhibit A came to life, the PR invoice with Adrian's MCF corporate account listed as payer. The memo line glared in bold, Phase 2 wedding speech. Gasps stirred in the gallery. Exhibit B followed a clean, time-stamped audio recording. Margaret's voice was unmistakable. "Clause 12 only works if Jonathan looks bad in public. That's why we staged the wedding statement." Adrian's response dripped arrogance. "The PR will make it stick." From the defense table, Margaret's lips thinned and Adrian's hand clenched the edge of the table. Isabella took the stand, confirming the chain of custody for the recording. Her voice was steady, each answer crisp. She detailed the exact time she planted the device at the Beverly Hills Gala, how she retrieved it, and how the data had been secured. The defense tried to rattle her, but she didn't blink. Then came Exhibit C, a financial trail linking Adrian's personal account to MCF, then to the PR firm, then directly to payments made during the week leading up to the wedding. Each transaction date matched a planning note in the PR firm's internal files Isabella had quietly copied. And finally, Exhibit D, a short backstage video. The court watched as Adrian leaned toward the MC, moments before Samantha's speech, whispering instructions. The MC nodded, glanced toward Margaret, and stepped back, just as Samantha walked to the microphone. Samantha's face drained of color. When the video ended, she rose quietly and walked out of the courtroom. I didn't turn to watch her go. My eyes stayed on the judge. The recess bell rang. Out in the hallway, Samantha approached me, her voice low. I didn't know. Not all of it. I'm sorry, Dad. I met her eyes for a moment, reading the conflict there. Let the truth do its work, I said simply. When we returned, the judge's ruling was succinct. Pending further proceedings, all control over the marital assets of Samantha Cole is hereby frozen. Transfer, sales, or reallocation are prohibited until final disposition. The words hit Adrian and Margaret like a physical blow. Adrian's jaw set, but Margaret looked as if someone had pulled the ground from beneath her. We left the courthouse to a wall of reporters. Daniel spoke for us, his statement measured. This is the first step in ensuring that justice prevails. We have confidence in the process. As we stepped into the waiting car, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. A single message. It's not over. We still have our last move. I looked out the window as the courthouse receded in the rearview mirror. The board was mine now, but the game wasn't finished. The anonymous text from 2 days ago had lingered in my mind, a faint echo of unfinished business. This morning, the echo turned into noise. Several national outlets received an email claiming I had once embezzled funds from a children's charity. Daniel was already at my kitchen table when I read the headline. His laptop glowed with the metadata analysis. They forged everything he said, his voice clipped. The date on the supposed transaction, 2 years before the charity even existed. Signatures, a digital compose. I poured coffee and let the confirmation settle. Then we treat it as the last stone they had to throw. By noon, we were standing in the glass atrium of one of Los Angeles's largest media towers. Cameras formed a jagged semicircle. Microphones jutted forward like bayonets. Isabella sat in the press gallery, her expression unreadable. Samantha was in the front row, her shoulders squared, her eyes steady. I stepped up to the podium, waited for the hum of the room to drop. I've stayed quiet. I began my voice, even not because I feared them, but because I was waiting for the moment they had no place left to hide. The screens behind me lit up. First, the so-called final card they'd played this morning, the forged charity documents. Daniel stepped forward briefly, pointing out the mismatched timestamps, the clumsy digital layering, and the damning IP trace. The room murmured, reporters scribbling furiously. Then I gave the signal for the next file. The lights dimmed slightly. Footage rolled from Samantha's memory card, the portion no one had seen yet. The MC backstage at the wedding leaned in as Adrian's voice whispered instructions. When she says the line, you cue the music, he told the MC. We want him blindsided. The MC nodded, checked his phone, and walked out. Gasps cut through the press hall. The video froze on Adrian's face, mid-command. We didn't stop there. The next clip, recorded weeks later, showed Adrian and Margaret at their dining table, glasses of wine half full, discussing how to twist Clause 12 to seize Samantha's assets and craft a PR narrative about a father who abandoned his daughter. When the lights came back up, the air was electric. Hands shot up. "Mr. Miles, do you believe criminal charges are warranted? Will you be pursuing damages?" I let the questions hang for a beat. That I said is for the law to decide. But today, I think the truth decided enough. Samantha stood stepping to the podium beside me. I was deceived, manipulated. "My father did nothing wrong," she said, her voice firm. "From this moment on, I stand with him." Flashes exploded like a storm. The Cole narrative collapsed in real time. Daniel closed the conference with the final blow. Effective immediately, Clause 12 of the prenuptial agreement is null and void. A criminal investigation into the forgery has been opened. The Cole's access to Samantha Miles's assets is revoked. Reporters shouted follow-ups, but I stepped down from the podium, the noise fading behind me. In the lobby, Daniel caught up. "So, that's the end of it." I smiled faintly. "For them, yes. For me, I'm just getting started." Outside, the city bustled as if nothing had happened. I walked into the crowd, letting it swallow me. But my gaze stayed sharp, scanning the horizon. Victories were never the end. They were simply the opening move of the next game. I walked out of that press room, knowing the Coles had finally run out of places to hide. They'd tried to bury me in lies, but every shovel they lifted only unearthed more truth. Justice doesn't come because you hope for it. It comes because you stand your ground and force it into the light. No matter how carefully a scheme is built, it can't outrun the moment truth arrives. And maybe, just maybe, standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow.